Hey everybody, welcome to this week's live Q&A. I have Colin Tierney and Natalie Downey here with me. And just before I introduce them, I want to do a couple little housekeeping things as usual. So just while we're talking here and as Colin and Natalie are doing their lesson, just try and keep your questions for the end. And we'll try and get to as many as we can at the end. But we don't want to interrupt because we have a lot to get through. Colin and Natalie are going to talk to us a little bit about their history as letterers and then teach us a lesson on Crayola calligraphy or Crayligraphy. So without further ado, let's just welcome them right in. So, hey, Colin and Natalie, how are you doing?
Hey.
Hi, Becca. How are you?
Good, good, good. Okay, so first of all, I just want to say, I didn't even say this when we were chatting beforehand, but congratulations on your new baby. That is so
thank you.
So
yeah.
That was like, I thought it wasn't due yet. I thought you had like a little more time.
No, we were due beginning of June, end of May. So he came on Tuesday, a little 5-pound baby, and we call him Colin Fitzgerald, but we'll call him Fitz.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah.
I love it.
That was my wife's decision to do that. Since I named my daughters, she got to name the boy.
Oh, I feel like that would usually be the opposite, but that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So can you just give everybody a little rundown on who both of you are and kind of how you work together and everything for the people who don't know you?
Sure. I'm Colin Tierney. I run a branding boutique called Tierney Studio with my wife. And basically, we started it, I would say 10 years ago. I was still working full-time as a graphic designer for a blue-collar work boot company. And I started off doing primarily logo designs and some illustration here and there. And then I got into lettering and calligraphy because I really enjoyed the process of deconstructing typography and really understanding the letter forms that go into it and trying to make them correlate with the icon of the logo. And then that process led me into logo types and learning how to create an identity through primarily words. So yeah, we've been doing that for about 10 years, and I've gone solo actually within the last few months. So I'm full on Tierney Studio. And about 3 years ago, I would post a lot of my process on Instagram and how I would get to the final logo design or a logo type. And oftentimes I would use just a simple Crayola marker. And I wasn't the first or only one to be doing this, but I just thought it was a really easy way to get to the final outcome of a deliverable that I could send off to my clients, a vectorized logo type. And this is how I would start. I would also use different kind of brush pens, some kind of pointed pens here and there. So a lot of people wanted to understand how I did it with a marker. And the best thing about markers is that they can emulate a brush pen, but they're 1,000 times easier to use. So the harder the nib, the more resistance there is on the paper, which makes it easier to write. And people were very interested in learning, so I decided to create this platform called Crayligraphy. And originally we called it Crayoligraphy, but there were some issues with Crayola and all that. I won't get into the specifics. One day, hopefully, everyone will find out. But as of now, it's Crayligraphy, and the tagline can be "Crazy Calligraphy," not Crayola calligraphy. But it's okay. People still understand it as just calligraphy with a marker. So I decided to create this platform for people to go to instead of having to respond to every individual post. I would just link them to the website, and there they can learn. And we're still writing out new tutorials, but the fundamentals are up, and it goes into some serious depth of how to start learning how to write with a marker. And I always recommend learning with a marker as opposed to a brush pen, because again, it creates the same kind of textures, the same kind of marks as a brush pen. It's just a lot easier. So that's where we're at now. I decided to invite my friend here, Natalie, to be a part of the Crayligraphy team. We are titling her as the creative director. Obviously, we like puns over here, so that's where that came from. She's very talented. I met her in person. I met you a few weeks ago, probably about, what, a month ago?
I guess it was like a month ago, yeah.
But I've been following her work for a few years now, and she would always participate in the Crayligraphy challenges that I would post weekly to my Craymunity, is what I call them. I can go on and on. I'm here all day.
I will allow it. This is like my favorite. It's in my Instagram bio that like dad jokes is one of the things I do, so I'll allow it. You can do it.
Yeah. I'm not a new dad, but I'm a new dad to a new little boy, so it's just going to keep coming, and it's just going to get worse and worse. So, yeah. So I decided Natalie is very talented. She would always participate, and she would show up for the challenges, and I loved her work. She has this, what I call the fragmented method, where you make your mark, you lift, you make your next mark. You make your mark, lift, you make your next mark, as opposed to the fluid method where it's constant marker to paper. And that's where I'm probably more focused on the fluid method, and you probably the fragmented method. And I just thought she complemented my work very well. So I invited her to be a part of the team. And now you can introduce yourself, Natalie.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Natalie Downey. So basically, I kind of have the same background as Colin, as far as I come from a graphic design background. For the last 5 years, I've worked for like a Baltimore-based graphic design firm doing logos and packaging. But recently, just that company unfortunately dissolved. So now I am, doing freelance full time and kind of, working for myself and kind of throwing myself more into Crayligraphy now that, I have the time to do that. But I started hand lettering and doing calligraphy almost 4 years ago. And it was just kind of a thing on the side, just being an artist. So I was like, that's something, that I had been following. And I was like, I, want to try that. And I originally started with really like soft brush pens starting out, which was like, oh my God, I can't do this, because when you start with that first tool being like a soft brush pen, it seems impossible. So then I think I saw like Colin and like a few other people using, Crayolas and magic markers. Matt Vergotis, yeah. He was which is funny because he's a lefty and I'm not, but I just loved his work. So I always, And
Matt's a really good buddy of mine too. He's from Australia. The Gold Coast, Australia. Yeah. He's a lefty calligrapher, lettering artist, and he's something to watch out for.
Yeah. So basically, after kind of initially starting out, with softer pens, I was like, oh, I want to give it a shot, give, magic markers a shot because they're inexpensive and, readily available to everybody. And then that was pretty much it for me. Like, if you look back on my Instagram posts, I very rarely use, any other pen now. It's become my favorite. And one of the things for me is I'm always been super heavy handed, even just writing like my normal handwriting. So for me, it holds up the best, I think, as far as, a calligraphy tool. And it's just a great way to start.
Yeah.
Plus, it's a lot cheaper. We didn't even talk about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's cheap.
It's so expensive.
Cheap, easily accessible, and fun. Like everyone can relate to a marker. We grew up learning how to draw with markers, so it kind of brings out the kid in you, and it's fun. And, I do it with my kids. While they're drawing, scribbling, whatever they're doing. I break out the markers too with them, and we just we have a little session, a little Saturday session. It's fun.
I honestly was sort of expecting you to say you started doing it when, your kids were just playing and you found their Crayola markers everywhere.
I did. Actually, that's exactly how it started. It was Thanksgiving like 4 years ago. And I was pretty good with a brush pen. And I saw someone on Instagram use a marker at one point. And my children were messing around with markers. They were drawing. And I was like, you know what? I'll just give it a try. And at first, I was so like in tune with a brush pen, I didn't really know how to use it correctly. And originally, I thought it was much more difficult. But then as I progressed and started using it more and more, I was like, this is easier. And when I was starting to teach, you know, family members or like individuals who would ask me in person, and I would have them test out a marker as opposed to like a brush pen, or I would actually have both of them right there in front of them, they would always say, yeah, this is so much more easier. So then the light bulbs, you know, went off, and also all the amount of requests and emails I was getting, it all just kind of made sense to start Crayligraphy.
Yeah, and I'm super excited for you to demonstrate kind of the difference between, you know, how you have to do the technique, because I get that question all the time, or I have people, because I don't teach it with a Crayola marker, but I run programs where I teach the basics, and I get a lot of people saying they don't have any brush pens, can they do it with Crayola? And I always tell them yes, but it's a little bit of a different technique, so I'm excited to get into that. Just a couple questions before you jump in. I often have a lot of people kind of asking my guests what your favorite like resources and tools were in the very beginning. Do you remember what any of your, or even now, any of your go-to kind of resources when you need to learn something new?
Are we talking like digital resources or like actual physical pens?
Pens,
all the above.
People you follow, anything that is like has been super useful to you.
Yeah, so a lot of the zebra pens I started using.
Yeah, same here.
I fell in love with them immediately. I liked the smaller brush on it, and the fact that they were firm made it 1,000 times easier. The texture that they emit was super cool when they dried up a little bit.
So I love zebra, and I was in Japan recently, and I went on a tour of their factory. And I got to see how they're all made. It was so cool. And they gave me like boxes and boxes full of samples, which was so awesome. So I'm constantly like talking about zebra. I love their brush pens so much. They're great.
Yeah, they're great. That was actually, those were like some of the first pens that I started using too. Yeah. And then Tombows, of course. I mean.
Yeah, Tombows are key.
It's just totally different than like magic marker.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, still all tools that, you know, I think when we started out, that's what we were using.
When I first started learning calligraphy, and I actually started lettering before I learned calligraphy, which some people say is backwards. I actually do recommend, if you're interested in hand lettering, to learn calligraphy first, because you understand what goes into letter forms, you know, where the weight contrast is within a specific letter. So like if it's a downstroke on an A, that's going to be a thicker part of that letter as opposed to the upstroke. But I was a little backwards. I learned hand lettering, and then I transitioned into calligraphy. But all through this process, I created a blog called In a Brush. It was, again, a play on words, like I'm in a rush. But this was in a brush it was before like Instagram got really heavy hitter calligraphers and hand letters. And it was a Tumblr blog. And I remember just inviting a bunch of different people in the community, in the lettering community, to submit their work. And I would post it, and I would post my own. And it was all just quick, like sketches, quick, you know, lettering or calligraphy sketches, quick, you know, not too overly edited or, you know, like, you know, super curated. It was just like something that we could post quick, and it got a lot of attention. It was featured in like Cosmopolitan and Business Insider. And then after a while, I was like, I don't want to just be another like curating account where I just repost other people's work. So then I just started posting my own work, and I was going back and forth between In a Brush and Instagram. And finally, I just transitioned to Instagram because that's where everyone was at the time. So
that was pretty much the main resource I used as far as just inspiration. And because I think like when I started about 4 years ago was when it was really kind of getting more, you know, widespread on Instagram. So, I mean, that was pretty much what I used as far as just, seeing what everyone else was doing and kind of pulling inspiration from my peers,
I would also reach out to more seasoned professionals at the time. One in particular, Claire Couillon, is a French lettering artist. I reached out to her and I emailed her as soon as I started to see her work. I think it was on Dribble. And I was enthralled immediately. I was like, I want to do that. I was primarily a icon typography mark logo designer, but I wanted to, branch out and, kind of advance my skill levels in not a totally different field, but, different enough. And I reached out to her and she was awesome in giving feedback. Which is kind of different because in today's day and age, you can't really do that as easily, just because I think social media kind of hinders that, reaching out to anyone and getting all this. I think I just reached out to her at the right time because she was well above me and well advanced in lettering specifically.
I think it's interesting that you see it like it's harder to reach out. I feel like for me, it was really easy to reach out that way. And I mean, you might not get as many responses because that person probably gets a million messages in a day. But if you do it properly and you're like really genuinely just wanting to connect with the person, you're not emailing them and saying, can I pick your brain? Or like, what pen do you use? Like that stuff is just the annoying stuff. But even for me, in the very beginning, I reached out to someone who was way above and beyond me. And she replied back and said, here's my phone number, give me a call. And she literally hopped on the phone with me and we talked for like an hour. And it's like, now we're buddies. And I was absolutely blown away at the very beginning. So, and
That's really cool.
This is a topic that we've talked about a couple of times now in these interviews about not being afraid to reach out to people who are ahead of you. Like it can really make a huge difference in your career.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think, just the term of having like a lettering community or, an art community, that's kind of really what it is. I mean, we all want to help each other. It is a community. So it's like, I think you're right when you say, it kind of depends on your approach. But I think if you approach it right, everyone that I've met through, Instagram or just, a graphic designer or a letter or calligrapher, they've all been, welcoming and extremely willing to give tips and advice and that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it definitely just depends on, how you approach an artist.
I think also where I was getting at, I've done like the very personal response to emails, several years ago, and I would receive crickets, absolutely no like grace or thanks. And it was just like, this isn't, at first I was like honored. I was like, oh, someone wants to learn from me. This is really cool. It's kind of a cool feeling. This is new. And then after a while, you get more and more requests. It's not sustainable. You can't run a business and give all this free advice.
But I mean, I completely agree with that. It has happened to me a couple of times. And I actually debated writing the person back and being like, did I not just give you like all of my information and you're not even like sending me a thank you kind of thing, which just drove me nuts. But like you two are a testament to the community aspect. Like, I mean, you two wouldn't have known each other at all if it weren't for Natalie participating in your challenges and stuff like that. Oh, did I lose you guys? Are we frozen? Okay, please hold, everyone. You guys had to switch?
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Our power went out here.
The power went out.
Oh, well, thank God for phones.
Yeah.
Wow, as if. Okay.
Hold on real quick. You see us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, that's terrible timing.
But, I mean, normally I don't have people with a backup right away, so that was perfect.
Well, that never happens, ever. We're in my studio, and that never happens.
Is the weather bad or something?
Nope, it's bright and sunny. No one else is in the building. I have no idea.
Weird.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're back.
Yeah.
Did you hear what I was saying about you two being like the perfect testament to that, though? I was saying that the whole, like, Natalie, you wouldn't have been Colin's creative director if you hadn't been participating in his community and stuff like that, right? So
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's perfect.
Way.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, Instagram is the only reason this is happening, you know, but that brought us together, basically. I mean, I remember probably like a year you know, into like me kind of starting and posting things on Instagram, you know, he had this was when he was in Baltimore as well, and he reached out to me and was like, hey, you know, we should get together sometime and like talk shop and all of that. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. Well, then like 2 years went by. We didn't actually meet in person until he moved away.
Right.
So, I mean, so it's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for, you know, kind of that community, we wouldn't even have paired up. So
yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Blessed. I love it. So, okay, I think we got to get into the lesson. I think people are really ready to hear about this. So, for anybody who's watching and has heard me talk about the fact that there was going to be free worksheets, I just popped up the URL on the screen, and the worksheets are awesome. They look like this. I've got mine printed out. And so these are Colin's reference guide for Crayligraphy. So if you guys want to go to that website, you can grab them right now, but you'll also be able to get them later. So don't like rush and leave the video to go get them. But yeah, if you guys want to just flip your screen and show us your stuff.
Sure.
Here,
Okay.
I'll do you first here.
So I'm going to mute myself and take myself out of the screen. So you guys just...
There we go.
All right. Hopefully they can still hear us.
Yeah.
Okay. Becca, are you able to come back on just to make sure you're able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Good. All right. Thank you. All right, so we good?
Yep, we're good.
So with the guides, they're the basic fundamentals of calligraphy, and more specifically, brush calligraphy. And like I said earlier, a marker will do just fine because it emulates a brush very well. Even with the textures, a dried up marker can even do the same kind of texture effects as a, you know, semi-dried up brush marker. And oftentimes I just tell people to just get comfortable. The whole point of this is to have fun. So don't get too wrapped up in, you know, finger placement. Obviously it is important. So, you know, after a while, after practicing a little bit, maybe be a little more, I guess, responsible with how you hold a marker. But first and foremost, just relax, kind of sit upright, make sure your hand is resting on your table and your paper. It doesn't need to be at a slant. And like I said, I started this with my kids, so I was probably sitting Indian style on a coffee table. But the main thing is just be comfortable. So this is the broad edge right here. And the idea is to make sure on downstrokes, and let me get a better marker than that. But you can see like the texture in here is really kind of cool. But on the downstrokes, you want to utilize that broad edge right there and make sure it's almost think of it as the pen being horizontal with the paper. It's not actually going to be horizontal, but you want it to rest at a position where it's flat on the paper. And for downstrokes, you just kind of pull down. So downstrokes are always going to be thicker than the upstrokes, and on the upstrokes, you want to use the point of your marker. And it doesn't have to be like everything at the same angle, you know. Obviously you want to, you know, try your best for consistent slants, but for right now, if you're just starting out, just kind of get used to the marker and go at your own speed. You know, you saw me at first go super slow with it, and actually the slower you go, the crisper the line, or I should say not crisper, but it would be a little bit thicker than, you know, a faster downstroke. Same with upstrokes, you know, take your time. So these are called slanted up and down strokes. And then for an arcing stroke, you know, for like lowercase a's and b's, so let's just do an A first. So you kind of want to rest your marker just like you were for a downstroke, and then pull in. So it's the same thing. It's going to be a thick downstroke, but it's arcing. So you want to kind of feel it in your wrist and in your and in your fingertips. So I say when you're marking a thicker downstroke, you're going to feel a little bit more pressure on the barrel of the marker in your fingertips. And then when you do upstrokes, I'll just go back to the slanted upstrokes. I often tell people to like relate it to holding a baby bird. You don't want to crush it, so you're going to have it much more, you're going to hold it much more lighter in your hand. It's not going to be, you know, too much pressure. So for an A.
Colin, we just got one question I wanted to jump in and ask.
Sure. Yep.
So when you're doing that, is that so like 99% the angle of the pen, or are you doing different pressures too?
For the arcing stroke?
Well, for all of it. So are you you're using the broader edge of the tip of the marker to make the thicker ones, or are you adding pressure also? Like, are you changing pressures like you would on a brush pen?
So I'll show you. I'm always using the broad edge for these thicker downstrokes. This is with no pressure. Okay, this is with pressure. So do you see the difference there? It still works with little pressure, but if you really want to get that contrasting weight, you want to press down. And a lot of people run into, they don't press down hard enough. So sometimes, you know, they'll get these strokes, and then for I often see like their A's look like this. And that, you know, that just doesn't look right at all. So, and there's no differentiation between, you know, upstroke thickness and downstrokes. So you want to make sure you press at least a little bit. That way you can go up, you know, thin.
So they're not quite as flexible as a brush pen, but you still want to vary the pressure a little bit.
Right. There's a subtle flex.
Okay.
It still works really nicely.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that would be the beginning of, let's just say, an A. So you pull up, and then you do the same thing, downward stroke. So you can practice that too, like lift up when you're 3/4 of the way down. Lift up with your marker, but you can feel it more in your fingertips. And that's what will create that little thin upstroke right there. You want to make sure when you do pull down for thick downstrokes, you complete it all the way through, or else if you don't, sometimes you'll get this tapered effect, which looks like that right there. So if you can see right there, this right here is all consistent right here. This goes inward. You don't want that. You want to complete your stroke all the way through. Let me get another. Can I use the brush? Okay. So, and I'm using this right here is just regular computer paper, you know, printing paper. It works just fine, but if you want to save the life of your marker, this is marker paper right here, and you'll be able to see the difference. I'm going to use your green.
Go ahead.
And now I'm using, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a Crayola marker. So right here is this the Up and Up?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is Up and Up by Target.
So Colin, does you know how brush pens will really like fray if you use them on crappier paper? Mm-hmm. Do these markers do that too, or is it really, it's just like it kind of sucks out more ink so they don't last as long?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
You want to answer that?
I wouldn't say they definitely don't fray like brush markers would, because they're definitely more durable in that sense. But it's almost more of a texture thing with the paper, not so much the marker. I do think that they last longer. This, obviously with smoother paper, it's going to last longer.
You can see the difference.
But you can it just feels drier, I feel like, when you use it. Even if it's a new marker, if you use it on like a more textured, like computer, like a printer paper, as opposed to marker paper.
Yeah. So there is a difference. I'm not sure if my phone would be able to pick up the subtleties, but there's more texture in here. Sometimes I do like using toothier paper, depending on the effect I'm trying to get. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to just practice and save the life of your marker, then definitely marker paper. The smoother the better.
So what's the brand of the paper you're using?
So this is Canson XL marker series paper.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yep. But if you don't have access to that, any kind of paper will do, and that's the point. Just get out your markers and get out anything that you can write on, and that'll work. That'll do just fine. So we did the right to left arcing stroke, and that would be for, let's just say an A. But if you wanted to do a B, you would do your initial downstroke, and sometimes it depends on how you write your B's. I mean, there's so many different styles you can utilize for this, but I would then use my arcing thin upstroke like that. So that would be 1, that would be 2, and then I would use the arcing downstroke to complete it. So 1, 2, 3. I'll just do little arrows. Sorry, these arrows are terrible, but you get the point. And then to create, this is ideally you want the right to left arcing downstroke and the left to right to reflect each other. So if you were to flip it on the axis 108 degrees, they would be the exact same stroke. And that's ideal right there. So I'm kind of pushing outward with my fingertips here. Are you catching my fingertips when I'm doing this? You can see they're going in this motion. So they're guiding the marker, but my wrist is also helping too. You can feel it right in your wrist. Same with this. Same with the left to right downstroke, arcing downstroke. Okay, so I wanted to also cover like different methods. I came up with a fluid versus fragment method, and I mentioned that previously. I'm more of a fluid writer, so when I write, I would write, let's just say minimum, for example. See how I don't lift my marker at all, besides to mark the tittle of the eye, versus Natalie, who's more of a fragmented, which would be more like this. Lift, 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 lift. I don't remember how to spell minimum, but you get the idea. That was a really poor example right there of a fluid method, but for beginners, I always recommend the fragmented method. That way they can really piece the letter individually and not see it as a letter form, but shapes that make up the letter. If you really think in your head when you're marking, as you're marking, thick down, thin up, thick down, thin up, and not so much like an M has to look like that. It creates a better shape in letter form. So I'm going to give you to Natalie so she can, because she's the pro at the fragmented method. And I should be somewhat good at the fluid, but my hands are a little shaky this morning.
I wanted to also ask you, Colin, as you're doing that, I'm kind of realizing how much of a difference there is between maybe your style and the one that I teach. So mine is sort of loosely based off of copperplate calligraphy. So we, instead of doing like up, down, it would be more of like the overturn stroke and the underturn stroke and stuff. So did you learn that in the beginning and kind of just change it to be your own style, or how did that happen?
So I am with you on that, actually. I do teach the overturn, the underturn, because let's just say within an M, you want to create that shoulder right there. So yes, that is important, but that's more of like a fluid method. Now I kind of remix it so it's both fluid and fragmented within my lettering or within my calligraphy. So it just depends on what's comfortable to you. You can still make that same, almost the same shape, just like that. Just by, utilizing, okay, that's up. I mean, that's downstroke right there. Okay, now I'm going to do the fluid method. Okay. And I don't know what letter that is, an N or an H. I don't know. But I'm just trying to point out, so you do have overturns and underturns and how do you?
I mean, I feel like I don't necessarily have a very like noticeable like overturn underturn to mine, because with my fragmented method I do it really quickly, and so it's more, I don't even know, it's like almost just, there's more movement I think with mine, so I don't really get those like really accentuated curves in mine necessarily.
Right.
I guess kind of a follow-up question then would be, when you do work with brush pens, do you do the same motion, or is it more dictated by the marker you're using?
For me, it's definitely dictated by the marker I'm using.
Okay.
Yeah, if I'm using like a softer brush pen, I actually definitely use the fluid method like for other brush pens, but with Crayolas, I just feel like I get better movement with the fragmented method.
I think it makes a lot of sense just because of the shape of the brush itself versus the tip of the marker itself. Okay, cool. That explains a lot.
Yeah.
And you can, hopefully these aren't too dried up, but this is one of the zebra brush pens. Oh, it's a little dried up, but can you still see it? Yeah. So I think it's easier with a brush pen to kind of create more of a fluid method. And the other, the reason why I call it crazy calligraphy, not only because you're writing with a marker, but kind of like breaking the rules in a way. Obviously, the instrument is going to be completely different than most, but also like the stylization can be kind of crazy. Like the letter forms, like there's no like, yes, learn. I'm very adamant about teaching the fundamentals because you need to learn these in order to understand how to break the rules. So I think it's really important to understand the rules first. And while there is, I guess you could do a fragmented method here. I don't want to go too fast because of the texture. But the whole idea is break the rules. As long as the letters are legible, it'll still work. Like add a little flair to it, or different swashes and ligatures. Swashes meaning like the extended serifs off of a letter form. So like for a capital A, that's accentuated right there. That would not be your typical copperplate calligraphy A. And that's the point. Like kind of make it work, make it still be able to be read easily, but also make it so it's fun and crazy, I know Natalie's style is a lot like that too, which drew me to your work. But, so, if you really go slow and you're intentional, you can still, create the same kind of, let's say, copper plate in this instance with a magic marker. You can do even like the black letter if you want, all because you still have the broad edge and the thin tip at your disposal. So it just depends on what your style is. If you don't have a style, that's okay. You can just kind of come up with your own eventually after learning the fundamentals and learning the basics into calligraphy. You're gonna say something? Oh, okay.
I was gonna agree with you.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say, like, finding your style comes, like you were saying, after you kind of learn the fundamentals and get comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll kind of find that naturally, I think.
A lot of times I recommend, if you're like, searching through a book and you see a lettering style that you might like, yes, you could blatantly copy it. That's fine. Just don't publicly post it. I'm a big advocate of copying people's work, but while you're learning. But please don't post it publicly. But if you see a letter form that you like within a certain style of work, take a picture of that letter, or like try to recreate it on your own, and then create your word or phrase based on what would relate back to that style of lettering. Don't like completely take every style of the artist's work and recreate that. So a lot of times I tell people to do that if they want to, try different techniques in their work. I'm going to show Natalie's work with a marker because she's crazy good.
Yeah, I was gonna actually ask you guys if you could do like, Colin, if you could write like A, B, C, D in your method, and then Natalie do the same in her method, and so just so we can see the difference.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Cool.
So it's probably going to be fast because I can't get like a rhythm unless I do it quickly. So
I call Natalie a ninja.
Just bear with me.
Right now she's got the purple belt. I mean, that's what, 2 seconds? A, B, C, D?
Could you do that one more time and just get a little closer?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's so much faster than what we're used to.
Yeah. So.
And you can you do it a little bit slower so people can understand that they don't have to go that fast? Still fragmented, still pieced, just a little bit slower. And we always tell people to go at your own pace. You don't have to be a wizard ninja like Natalie, but that's what 4 years of experience will get you.
Practice.
Yeah.
Every day.
People are sending a lot of heart eyes to that.
Cool.
Well, good.
Do you want me to do? I'll do the fluid real quick in ABC.
I'll do one more just to fill this space, and then you can.
Cool.
And then we'll switch colors so we can see the difference. All right.
Okay, so this is the fragmented. This will be the handwriting is terrible, ironically. All right, this will be the fluid. So this I won't necessarily not ever lift up my marker, but it'll be primarily on the paper at the whole time during the whole letter form process. Are you connecting it? Okay, no.
Sorry if I'm in your way.
So that's one. Now I'll try to change up. That's a terrible A, but I'll try to change up the style a little bit, so make it a little bit more flourishy, I guess. So. And see, I do lift it up there, so that's completely okay. And the fluid, as you can see, is much slower than the fragmented. But if you're starting off, like I said, fragmented is probably best, and you'll probably go just as slow as the fluid. I'll do it again here. Yeah. So, and then like you can go back in if you want to stylize it even more. This is where like the hand lettering part comes in. You know, if you want those like bell bottom letter forms where it's like kind of thicker up top or at the bottom, sorry. You know, don't be afraid to go in and make them really kind of unique if you want. But that's, again, all part of, you know, coming up with a different kind of look or style. And so you have that, like, I'm not going to say vintage, but, you know, mid-century style lettering look if you're trying to go that style.
So when
capitals,
you're teaching, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but when you're
a little different when it comes to capitals because I think they're a little bit easier. This is where you would bringing your arm more into play. So I like to tell people who are learning capitals to treat it as if like your arm is in a cast. Can you get my arm movement here?
Mm-hmm.
So you would lock your whole arm, your wrist, forearm, bicep, shoulder is the only thing that's moving. And that's where you can work a little bit larger. So if you're just, let's just do a capital A. So everything is locked right now. The only thing moving is my rotator cuff. C is going to be a little bit different. D. And you can treat, you can see it when I do horizontals, I make sure the marker is pointed, you know, direct. It's like perpendicular to my body right now. So as opposed to these downstrokes, like we learned in the fundamental part, when I'm doing horizontals, I actually turn my wrist so it's locked to this way as opposed to this. So you can see the way I treat that. And the reason why that works is because the subtle flex of the marker. I mean, it's just, that's the great thing about this is you can just, you know, kind of angle your marker the way you want it and you'll be able to get the shape and style that you like. So again, like an F, downstroke, and you can go either way. So that was right to left. You can go left to right. Doesn't really matter. You know, S's. I'm sorry, I'm using a lot of your paper.
That's okay.
You know, you can create any kind of style. Like if you want to your spine's probably going to be pretty consistent in your S, but if you want like a larger top portion and a smaller bottom portion, you can do that just all in the way you're moving your arm. And it really is, I'm sorry, your shoulder. And it really is just pretend like your arm is in a cast and you can't move anything. So let's see. What's another letter that I like? A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
R.
Oh, yeah. R. So that's kind of like a kick out where I'm actually overwriting right there and going down.
I do the same thing.
You got to cock your wrist. Too, yeah, K. So K. And then I noticed you, Natalie, go back up sometimes.
Yeah, I do that with like V's and W's.
Yeah,
and
you go back up.
Yeah.
I could do like a lowercase K and kind of kick out right there. There's another one. So yeah, I mean, if you want, like, that's the craziness part of it. Like, that's not your traditional H right there, but it's kind of cool looking, It just depends on the look you're going for. I'm getting marker everywhere. Yeah, so you want to show how you do? I think Natalie approaches
I'll do some capitals.
Capitals a little differently.
Yeah, I don't think I lock my arm quite as much. But I don't really know now that I'm thinking about it.
It kind of depends on how large a format you're going to. I mean, I was working really large there.
S's are kind of a nightmare, but...
Oh, yeah, you treat them much differently, but it's still nice.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, is you can do them like so many different ways.
Yeah.
And like R. And so I do the same thing as Colin. I always kind of overwrite for you can just get a better tail. And then, like he said, I go down sometimes, so like I'll kind of do like that motion for K's and like W's. I do that, so like, and then I'll basically add kind of like a little flare at the top.
I love your W's. I think those are awesome.
Thank you. And I mean, and you can do a ton of stuff like adding, flourishes and all kind. I mean, if you wanted to add like something like that to it, or I mean, there's a ton of stuff. Once you get, the basic strokes down, you can kind of start playing with it.
So just as I just got reminded as you were talking about overturning your hand, do either of you have a little bit of advice for lefties? There was someone in the group who had asked about that, and I am curious to know if you find that lefties really enjoy, or not necessarily Crayola, but marker calligraphy, because you can just turn your hand in all those different ways and find what's comfortable.
I've noticed in my workshops, I always have the occasional one or two lefties in them. And I have actually practiced with my left hand so I could help teach them. It's not pretty, but I still want to understand what they're going through because I get it. I mean,
I'll doodle while you're talking.
Yeah, the Western world, I mean, we're primarily right-handers, so it's got to be a struggle for lefties. And I have actually interviewed a couple people on Crayligraphy.com who are lefties, who approach it differently. So Matt Vergotis is one of them, and he is an overwriter, where you want to show how that would be where you'd go.
Yeah. So with left. I was left-handed.
So you're actually writing.
Your baseline's going to be here, and you're going to be writing above that.
Yeah, and I've been told lefties are comfortable with transitioning to being an overwriter. Like it's an easier transition, and it's not something that is too difficult of a task to ask. Matt's worked a lot of lefties too, who are new to calligraphy, and they can pretty much get the idea of going the overhand route. The other person I interviewed, Sarah Pearson of the Inky Hand, she is an underwriter, and
which that blows my mind.
Yeah, so underwriter, that's how us as righties, yeah. That's how right-handers normally write. So they're writing underneath. The problem with that technique is smudging.
Right.
With your palm, or I guess to be the side of your hand. But she's able to lift it just enough so it doesn't affect her work. But feel free to read a little bit more in depth on Crayligraphy.com. And it's under the interview section for Learn Calligraphy. And oh yeah, those are Z's. So you do the regular Z, yeah.
Well, so you could do the regular, or it's like then you have to deal. If you want to do like that kind of Z.
Yeah. So there's so many different ways, so many different styles you can choose from. In my worksheet, my reference guide, that's more of just a basic kind of a brush calligraphy style. Obviously, there's several different there's several different ways you could treat your letter forms, but that's why we're all here. That's why we love words and lettering and writing it, and we're just drawn to it because there's so many different ways you can approach it.
So Colin, on these on your reference guide, are these kind of like the basic strokes you would have people practice beforehand?
Yeah. So just get comfortable with the basic strokes. I always say if you practice 20 minutes a day, in a year you're going to turn around and laugh at how good you got.
That's so true.
And it's just 20 minutes a day. So a lot of people don't understand, like they don't understand how little amount of time you need to commit to this to get better in such a short amount of time. That's why I came up with Saturcray, another pun challenge.
You can turn it around if you want. We can always do more of this if they want, but that way you can see us again.
So Saturcray is a weekly prompt for Crayligraphy, and it's just to help people to get in the mode once a week of practicing, depending on the challenge. So this past week was what? Last week's was really fun. It was favorite superhero.
Yeah.
And it just gets everyone involved. And it doesn't have to be, it can be a beginner who wants to submit it, and by submitting it, you just hashtag Saturcray, and sometimes the guest lettering artist who we collaborate with, and it just gets them in that mode, to practice weekly or daily.
I think it really helps with just like, the brainstorming ruts that we can all get in, because there are so many times where I'll sit down and be like, okay, like what am I gonna letter, like what word? But this kind of like already tells you, like, look, this is your favorite whatever, and so I don't know, it just kind of helps with that, kind of the flow of just inspiration too.
People are always asking me for lettering challenges, so I think you'll get some new people this week for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, they're always fun. And just I think one thing that's kind of stands apart from regular brush pens and stuff is like just the colors that you can get through magic markers, and the textures and the gradients. Like the natural gradients for me, since I do it so quickly, like my downstrokes, and it only really works, I feel like, with magic markers, is that it's darker at the top and then it kind of fades, so it has this really cool like gradient that it just is a natural thing that it produces. So I think that's pretty awesome too. So yeah, anyone that wants to join in, it's a lot of fun.
So just to kind of cap things off, I have a couple people asking if you can show us how to write some words. Would one of you be able to write maybe just the Happy Ever Crafters and see, so we can see what that looks like?
Oh man, that's a long one.
Yeah, but you do it so fast.
Yeah, it'll take you like 2 seconds.
All right.
The Happy Ever Crafters.
Bear with me. Keep in mind, it's I'm not laying this out ahead of time.
Yeah. So what people don't know is, when we post work, it's not like one and done type thing. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. A lot of paper. A lot of trees actually. Composition wise, you don't know the layout you want to go with. So this is how we start. I mean, this is exactly what Natalie's doing. You just kind of write it out first, see what works, see if there's any cool.
So like one with that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
So like after I wrote happy, I kind of like, you notice that there are certain like nooks and dips, and so like I'm gonna put the E basically where there's kind of like negative space there.
Oh, that's a good point.
And hope that it's
works.
gonna work, because I'm kind of like with the R and the Y, that might get a little weird, but
I also
that's a good point.
Yeah,
but in the next go, which you won't do here, maybe you will, but that's the whole point of the evolution of this. Like, she understands now there will be a dip between the H and the P, and that'll be a snug little spot for the E to just kind of fit right in. And then that's how you just keep writing it and writing it over and seeing if there's any ligatures, that work together, or, swashes and underlines to kind of complete the phrase. In this case, your brand. That's really cool.
It's really slot like this. I would rework this, but I mean, that's one awesome thing about it's not like, these are inexpensive, and it's just a great way to kind of like lay things out. And, another thing that Colin and I do is, once you get kind of a draft that you're happy with, you can always use tracing paper at that point too, and kind of refine it and go over it with a Sharpie or, whatever pens that you want to use. And I think that's a kind of a big step too in taking it from, this form to like a logo, because, before you actually digitize it and vectorize it, you kind of want to refine it. So,
right.
I mean, that's another thing that I do a lot, is I'll just put tracing paper over it, and then that way you can kind of, move letters around that didn't work on your draft and things like that. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I always recommend. So that's writing. That's calligraphy right there. It's not always going to look great on the first go. But, once you start refining, which brings in the hand lettering part of it, refinement is going in and actually, straightening up the letter forms, straightening up sorry. Still, okay. I didn't know if I lost you. Straightening up the downstrokes, making sure the consistencies are pretty, equal, like the same thickness and downstrokes and upstrokes. And a lot of times I'll just take the same color, but in pencil form. So I'll take a colored pencil, and in this case it would be a purple colored pencil, and go in and, sorry Natalie, I'm really like critiquing you right now.
Yeah,
but I would make sure like the upstroke of the Y would connect to the terminal of that, and the terminal is right here. It'd just be little things here and there. And then from there, if we're talking about logo types, like Natalie said, you bring in tracing paper, restructure it so it fits a little better, and then scan it in and start vectoring it, digitizing it through, whatever software you have to do that.
Well, I think it looks perfect just the way it is. You could mail that to me if you want to. So I have a little thing popped up right now saying for people to ask their questions if they have any. But just one thing that I was wondering about, and we forgot to talk about this at the beginning, is do you have a preference for what type of, I know you were using that broad-edged one, but do you guys ever use the super tips or any of those like smaller weirdo Crayola, or not necessarily Crayola, I guess, any markers?
Pipsqueaks.
Oh yeah, there's the little, pipsqueaks.
These are my favorite. Because I work small. So.
See, those are hard for me to use. Like, they don't fit in my hand right. Like, I guess I just have a wide grip or something. So, like, every time I try to use those, it doesn't feel right to me. I think super tips I don't ever use them because I think they're actually pretty different from, I don't know.
They are different. They're a different feeling, but it still does the job.
Right. It's still, I mean, the same idea, basically. And the tips are very similar, just it's a lot smaller. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, it's just easier to work on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
And he's the opposite. He likes working on a smaller scale. So I think it just kind of depends on what's most comfortable to you. You know, it's like if you buy the pipsqueaks and they just don't fit in your hand, I mean, don't use them. You know, use what works for you.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, well, it doesn't really seem like anybody has any burning questions. That means we answered them all pretty well, I guess, already. So if you had one piece of advice for people who are trying to or just going to start learning this, what would it be?
I mean, I answer the same way this question every time, but it's honestly just practice and patience. I mean, I think when I first started, the most frustrating thing was I'm definitely one of those people that's like, if something doesn't come easily to me right away, I get frustrated and it's like, oh, I'm not good at this. But to me, calligraphy is one of those things that if you stick with it and you have the patience and you just, you know, force yourself to, like Colin said, take 20 minutes a day, take 5 minutes a day if that's all you have, and just, you know, work on the basic stroke starting out. And then from there, you'll be able to kind of piece the letter forms together from that. So just, it really is just practice and patience for me.
Yeah.
Natalie, would that be the same answer if someone asked you if you had any tips for control on the fragmented method? Just because that's what someone's question is now.
Okay, so for me, I get my control from just rhythm. Sorry, hold on. We were running out of battery there. So for me, I know it sounds crazy, but the speed, like the reason I do it so quickly is because I get consistency in my strokes. So like the quicker I do downstrokes, like the more consistent that they are, and the quicker that I do upstrokes. So I think all it is for me with the fragmented is speed and rhythm. So it's like once you get into that motion, because it's almost like a muscle memory thing. You know, repetitive. Like the quicker you do the next stroke, the more similar it's going to be like the one before it, if that makes sense. So.
And that comes with just repetition.
Yeah.
Repetition. You create the same stroke and you just try to recreate it each time. And after a while, you're going to be, you know, working pretty fast.
Yeah. I mean, really, if you look on my Instagram or Colin's, you know, whatever, if you go way, way back, you'll be like, oh, like she was awful because I just didn't have like that muscle memory yet. So it's like the more you do it, the more naturally, you know, it comes to you.
Right. And you'll start to see like the wonky lines. It just doesn't look as smooth, and that's all because you're just not confident enough in your strokes. But that's part of the process. I mean, the way to get to where Natalie is through continual practice, you know, every single day, and repetition, just recreating the same strokes. I mean, for me, after writing the Happy Ever Crafters, if I were to have written that, I would take another half hour to an hour to write that. And that's through repetition, seeing what works, what doesn't work.
Right.
And after a while, you will get to a better point, you know, from point A to point B, C, D, you know, wherever you're at.
Awesome. Love it. I'm always telling people practice, but
yeah. And, you know, use these resources, you know, it's like, it's awesome that you're doing these interviews and we're able to kind of like, you know, teach people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just kind of tying into what we were talking about earlier, don't be afraid to reach out, you know, to an artist if you have a question, or, you know, using resources like groups on Facebook and things like that.
Cool. Okay. So last question. What is new and upcoming in your world? Like anything exciting we should be telling people about?
Workshops. We're going to be, we're working with, so I worked with Good Type at the beginning of the year. I worked with Good Type and we went to New York City and I had an awesome workshop there with them. I did one at a conference called Creative South a few years ago. I'm just really enjoying the process of learning to teach. And I've done this now, you know, I've done several workshops now, so I'm pretty comfortable with it. And I just love teaching people what I know. I even went to an elementary school last month and taught a bunch of, you know, second and third graders Crayligraphy. And the best thing about it is I didn't have to dumb it down. It's already dumbed down enough. It's pretty easy. Obviously, I spoke to them differently, but for the most part, it's the same resources for learning. It's the same information. And again, that's the point of Crayligraphy. Like, you can teach younger children, how to write with intention.
So where can people find your list of workshops? Do you have one up right now?
We do right now. We're going to add more. Right now it's crayligraphy.com/workshops. And right now we have one upcoming in New Orleans with Lionheart Prints, and that'll be at the beginning of July. That's the only one showing right now, but Natalie and I are going to work on one that's local here not here specifically where we're at, but in the Baltimore area. Working with Terrence of Tin Lund Studio in a Houston workshop. So the idea is to go around to different cities, work with other educators is what I call them. Thank you very much. Yeah. So work with different people to eventually be able to host their own Crayligraphy workshop. As you and now your audience know, I have a growing family. So it's the idea of starting my own business was, yes, I want to do something on my own and, build this platform for people to go to. But also I really want to spend time with my family. I have a 3, 2, and now a baby. So the idea is to go to these cities and work with other instructors so that they can eventually host their own Crayligraphy workshop around, hopefully, the world. We get people wanting us to go to, for example, I got a submission yesterday to Sydney, and that was like the 3rd submission for Sydney, which is really cool. I would love to go out there. I could meet my buddy Matt Vergotis, but it's just not in the cards at this point in time. So for right now,
but Canada might be.
Yes. Yep. And by at this point in time, like I'm saying, like in the future, right now, I understand I have to go to these places to work with these other people and create these, communities that people can go to and learn, calligraphy in the easiest manner possible. So, yes, Toronto. I don't know if we're collaborating or working differently. I don't know yet, but either way, we'll get to actually meet in person, and that'll be exciting.
Yeah, and usually there are quite a few people in here watching from Toronto. And I love that you say Toronto, because most Americans will say Toronto, and I'm always correcting them, it's Toronto. But yeah,
I've been there several.
We usually have lots of people tuning in from there. So if anyone's in Toronto, stay tuned, because Colin and I are trying to work something out right now in the near future.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so where can everyone find you both? So I've got your Instagram handles up here, but anywhere else that you prefer to send people to find you?
Well, I do have a website, but it's mainly like my graphic design work, as far as like logos and things like that. But it's all Natalie Downey Design. So either nataliedowneydesign.com or that same handle on Instagram. So.
Crayligraphy everywhere, like at Crayligraphy, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I just recently signed on to Dribble with Crayligraphy. But if you're interested in learning more about my work on a more personal basis, it's everywhere at Tierney Studio, and tierneystudio.com. You can see some of my branding work that I've done over the years.
Cool. So we're going to have all the resources, and we're going to put this up on YouTube too. So anybody who's watching will be able to get these awesome worksheets. And right after this is done, I'll put it in the notes on the Facebook group. But thank you guys so much. That was awesome. I think it's super helpful for people to see. And now I have somewhere to point people to when they ask me about doing it with markers, because I'm like, I can't demonstrate that very well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
Becca.
thank you.
We really
yeah. Looking forward to a real live workshop at some point.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Okay, so we'll talk to you guys later, and I'll get all these links up ASAP.
Sounds
All
good.
right, thanks.
Okay, thanks, guys. See ya.
See ya.
Bye-bye.